Okay, I remembered the mic this time. So, tonight is the last message, both in terms of the entire, functionalities of Office's series here, and also the last of these little, individually focused Office messages. We've done all 5 in a row here, with maybe a 2-month break in between prophets and evangelists, but hey, that's the thing. Anyway, tonight's about apostles. I'm going to get rid of my glasses to remove glare here. The office of the apostle, as I said during the first Office series, is the least known office. And we don't really understand a lot of facets of it in general because we don't talk about it. Like I said last week, and like I've said so many times, the church as it is today is run and created by evangelists. And as a result, we don't really have a significant understanding of apostles. The truth is that a lot of the church is just trying to make everybody be evangelists. And we're just not all built that way. And the reality is that when we talk about apostles, most apostles are not in the church. There are people who will show up to church and they don't really find themselves having a place. A lot of prophets have this happen too, where they don't feel welcome. I mean, to be real with you about church dynamics and just kind of what goes on, and any of you who watch this can probably speak to the reality of this having been your experience. Stephanie, Dusty, Heather, the love of my life, Josh, going into a what some might call nominal church, or a church that's not really involved in the spiritual gifts. If you're a prophet and you walk in there and you start sharing words, you might find yourself chased out with pitchforks.
Right.
And
or
the same
heavily censored.
If you're lucky, you'll be heavily censored.
Right.
If you're unlucky, you'll just be straight prosecuted. And I know that Christians throw around the word prosecuted a lot, but being publicly shamed and mocked and having people spread rumors about you, about how crazy you are, or how you're a fake, or how you're actually possessed by demons or things like that, that's stuff that actually happens in the church, and that's what prophets go through. Apostles do too. Because see, the reality is with apostles, there's this innate thing where they just don't... There's a vision there that every apostle has that makes the church as it's run right now unfulfilling. And, as a result, if they're there, they'll speak up about it. They'll speak up about what they see. They'll speak up about what they're feeling. They'll speak up about what's off. And nobody appreciates that. As it comes down to it, a lot of, we've talked before a few times about evangelists and kind of the way that they like to go with what works, whereas apostles are more idealistic. And as a result, there is a clash there, because doing things the right way may not garner the results that you want or be the most successful way to do things. And most apostles, just like prophets, are going to be focused, and teachers as well, like we talked about with the whole truth-telling video. They're going to be focused on the truth and what the best way is and what the right thing to do is. So as such, that's where they're going to stay. And the difference between apostles and the other two very truth-focused ones is that they'll fight about it. They will fight tooth and nail endlessly on and on and on, because apostles in general are conflict oriented. And that's actually, and saying all this, like, this could feel like a kind of a diatribe when you look at the title of the video and it says, like, founding. But on the contrary, this is actually intrinsic to an intrinsic detail of apostles and how they work, and specifically even this particular role that they serve and this gifting that they have, which is founding. See, you cannot, when we talk about this life and this world as Christians, as followers of Jesus, we oftentimes recognize that, I mean, we've had it pounded into our heads that we're in a state of war. On a spiritual level, we are continuously at war, and demons have set up their own little domains in this world. And as a result of that, you can't, if you're the kind of person who wants to go set up a church, you will find yourself dealing with resistance. Everyone will. It doesn't matter who you are or what you do. If you want to do like a children's ministry, you will meet resistance. Because people won't even know why. Like, when they look back on it, they'll wonder why they were so aggressive. Why did they have such an issue with that? Well, because it's not really them. And you know, a lot of people can argue these points, and it doesn't really matter if they argue it or not. They're wrong. I'm just going to straight up say it. Hashtag no filter. Hashtag sorry not sorry. Like, there is a spiritual realm, and you know, it's rife with conflict, and it does bleed through. And the thing of it is that God has enemies, a lot of them. Like, a third of the angels that he created are qualifiably his enemies, which sucks. Anyway, the point is this, is that apostles are conflict oriented, and one of the great giftings that they have is their will to fight. Every apostle has that gift, for better or worse, depending on their level of maturity. And
what is it for?
Huh?
What is it for?
For what I'm talking about right now, which is in order to cut into these places where darkness exists and create something. Because see, the thing of it is founding, when I talk about founding, and I know I kind of dove into it here a little bit, apostles bring foundations, and we talked about that in the first talk about apostles. And every time that we've talked about the house, the analogy of the house, the apostles create the foundation. Founding is an important facet of, it's what apostles do, but it's also what their role in the churches. It's what they're naturally just gifted at. And of course, anybody can, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit, because that's actually kind of a thing to go over that God gave me here. But for right now, just to focus on what founding is and what I mean by that, it is this ability to go into a place, dark or light, it doesn't matter, any place in this world, and to begin changing the spiritual atmosphere by bringing something into it. Bringing something new into it, by bringing God with you, and by creating a sort of a new biome, if you will, where others can flourish and grow. That's what apostles do. That's what they're for. That's what the entire office brings to the table here in terms of functionality. And I mean, obviously there's more, there's a lot more. We've talked about different facets throughout the course of this series alone, and the truth is we could go on and on and on. But like I said at the outset, it was kind of, we're going to go as long as God says go, and this is the end. So, the thing is that, and you find this throughout the scriptures. See, a lot of the reason for apostles being so misunderstood, so poorly known, is that a lot of the church doesn't even kind of disavows their existence. A lot of churches, and like you find this at some Bible colleges even, and different things like that, they'll sit back and tell you, oh, the apostles don't exist anymore. Or more like, or, you know, the alternate is that we're all apostles. Because apostle means sent one, and we're all sent by Jesus. Sorry, I choked on that. Anyway, the thing is that although there is a truth to that, that actually just completely disregards the reality of this office, this gifting, this role, this very real kind of place and service this person exists in. It also completely disregards significant chunks of the Bible. I mean, when Paul sits there and talks about how some are given to be apostles, prophets, evangelists, I mean, everything that we get the fivefold ministry from in Ephesians 4. I apologize to anybody listening to this with headphones, but I have Mountain Dew.
Fine. I didn't want to hide behind the Mountain Dew anyway.
That is what gives me energy for life.
Or helps you sleep.
Sometimes. Anyway, I used to drink a cup of Mountain Dew before bed every night, and then I'd fall asleep and sleep like a baby, because it makes me happy, and that's what it's about.
My husband is an adult, I promise.
I love you too, even though you mock me. Anyway.
You shall thank me later.
Oh, what was I talking about? I'm glad that we're capturing like this here, because this is the group experience, guys. I mean, maybe you guys have missed this, but I mean, you would remember that this is normal. This is so normal. It's a lot of me trying to share stuff and then forgetting, either because I get into a fight with my wife.
Like a physical fight.
Right, a physical fight. We fight at Edgefield. Remember the time she hit me with a chair?
Broke it over his neck.
Uh-huh.
Woo!
Oh, it was so much fun. Anyway, like I was saying, you know, you have to disregard significant portion of the Bible in order to believe the idea that apostles aren't there. Yeah. You know, when Paul talks about the fivefold ministry in Ephesians 4, and I know we're applying stuff, we can fight about that later. The point is he specifically designates apostles as being their own unique thing. And then even beyond that, when you look at when you read like Acts and see what the apostles did, and even just reading the stories about Peter and John and dang it, Philip or Mark, who was the one who went away to Africa?
I would think it was Philip, but I don't know.
I think it's Philip. Anyway, but with all of these people, you know, and then Paul, when God picked him, you know, when Jesus showed himself to him and said, you know, these were all people who, yes, God chose them. I mean, Jesus picked his disciples. But what did they do? in the story of Acts, you find that they went out and they went places and they began to found something. I mean, the entire journey of Paul and Barnabas was to go around and create churches. They went all around the Mediterranean, and they founded churches. They founded new communities of believers. And I mean, the stories are crazy. I mean, the Church of Philippi was one of my favorite ones, because it's literally just like Paul shows up in Philippi, and he makes friends with a merchant there who sells purple dye, which was a big deal in the Roman days. Only the one, because it's like a species of snail that exists in the Mediterranean. That's where they got the purple dye. And two, because it was only people of regal stature were allowed to use purple or wear purple. So she was kind of
Kind of a royal color.
It was a royal color, which means she was kind of making bank. But Paul made friends with her, and then got arrested, and made friends with the guard. That when he didn't leave the jail during a potential prison break, the guard was just like blessed because Paul didn't leave. So, which means the guard himself wasn't going to get his head taken off. And what was it? Oh yeah, there was also a woman who was demon possessed and was exorcised, and that was their church. The Church of Philippi was those three people and Paul, until Paul left and left it to those three people. When I talk about founding and when I talk about conflict and the importance of apostles being able to be in conflict, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like, and it's so important, because you need that hard-nosed commitment to what you're doing and to what you're called to do. Being a sent one is not a word. It's not a thing of like, oh, I read the Bible and I'm technically a sent one, so I guess I'm gonna go do stuff. No, God literally tells you to do a thing and you go do it. That's what that means. God sent means actually God sent, not I've adopted this ministry. It's I have a ministry and I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. That's why when we talked about apostles the first time, I said very clearly this one thing. Apostles don't function without God. See, immature apostles are kind of like focused on all kinds of other things. They'll move around to different interests very quickly. And it doesn't matter if they're mature or immature, they still do that. It's just that when they're immature, those things become like their hyper-focused thing, because they're always looking for something to grab onto. They're looking for something that's going to hook them and something that's going to move them.
To start something from nothing, basically.
Yeah. And it's not until we find God that apostles really come into their own. And when they have that something to sink their teeth into and really cling to and say, oh, this is my mission. That's when they're able to go and do the craziest, most wild things, to go out and create to found these new places, these new biomes, which create a community. An opportunity for community to exist and grow and develop into an actual flourishing church, a piece of heaven on earth. That's what I mean when I talk about founding. Okay. So just to kind of get that definition out there, clarified and everything like that. Now, unfortunately, the truth is that a lot of apostles don't do that. Number one is that a lot of apostles don't know they're apostles. That's one big problem. when the church is run by evangelists, teachers, and shepherds, and the official statement for the church in general is apostles don't exist, or we're all apostles because of this adopted statement, this misappropriation created by our verbiage, then yeah, you have a whole subgroup of people who have no clue what they're doing. And they feel led to go in a direction, they feel a call, they feel a lot of things, and they have nothing to do with it, because whenever they seek any kind of counsel on what's going on, they get directed to things that are so incredibly, what's the word? Flimsy? Insignificant? Yeah. They just...
things that take away from their true purpose.
Yeah. It ends up being things that just lack the considerable depth that they need, and that they're feeling the need for. So they're not content with, giving out food boxes, or, leaving Bibles at the motel, or things like that. They have to be hands-on. They want to create. They have to found. Now, as a result, like I said, a lot of apostles are not in the church. And, as a result, though, that need for foundations to be made, that is not gone unnoticed. Like, as I've said with every single one of these messages, to beat this dead horse over and over again, there's no monopoly here. Anybody can found something. Anybody can sit down and do it. Just because somebody's an apostle doesn't mean that they're the only people that can do it. The reality is that most churches are founded by evangelists. Most churches, period. And the reason for that is that evangelists are recognizing that need. Like, in general, we talked about zeal last week and evangelists and that gift that they have. Well, that same gift is what motivates them to go do this. They see the need. And even though they may not be the best equipped to do it, and there's a whole plethora of reasons, in terms of like how they function and what they do and what they're looking for and different things like that. And as a result, they're not always the best equipped to like create something, to generate that new church. But they go do it. And that's important. And even if it's not perfect, they still do it. And as a result, you get new churches.
It'd be kind of like saying that, we can all play basketball. Because we can all learn basketball. But then there are the Michael Jordans.
Right.
And, can we really say there's no difference there?
Right.
The gifting means nothing.
Right. You're either a Michael Jordan or a Kobe Bryant, or you're just, the other guys on the team who nobody ever remembers the names of. And that sucks. They're all pro level and they're all like incredibly talented men.
Yeah. But anybody can be a basketball player.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not true. It just takes away like the uniqueness and the special purpose.
Yeah.
In, the apostolic anointing.
Yeah. So with that, that's the reality, is that a lot of evangelists, they're doing that work. And, we get churches as a result. But they're not very strong. Some go under. A lot of them kind of hobble along and are kind of crafted on the back of the evangelists, because evangelists are also confrontational. They also have that nature that allows them to like delve into conflict. Which, again, that's important because it's sometimes you have to like face the odds and then get stubborn in the face of them and fight and fight and fight and fight and stand in the process. Both those offices are probably the most gifted in that particular arena. So it's fitting that it would be evangelists to step up and do the work that apostles are not. And, that's the big thing here, is that, like, as a result, you've got these, God has put stuff on people's hearts. And the reality is he's going to talk to as many as he needs to in order to get it done. Somebody has to stand up and say, okay, I'm going to do it. And a lot of evangelists answer that call because of that zeal. But they're not founders, not really. As a result, like I said, they end up with churches that are a little frail. Or they have like really nasty circumstances because they have less of a focus on what's right and more of a focus on what works. A lot of churches are focused on, getting people in the doors. They're going to change their worship. They're going to change their dynamic. They're going to change their style. I mean, literally, like the way they dress, the way they talk, the way they act, the jokes they make, the way in which they conduct their services. So there's a set order. Even in the way that they do their sermons, there's a set order of things, which is, just to put them on blast because I hate it. It's, you start off with a joke, and then you take that joke and you lead into a personal story that relates to your message, and then you get into your message.
So now that you've told me that, I can be a preacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Standard practice for building a sermon or a message or whatever. And seriously, go look at it. Go watch. Now that you have this information, let it ruin your church services for the rest of your life.
You're a little too happy about that.
I kid, kind of, but not really. Like, actually, you can't unsee it once you've seen it. And if you find a church that doesn't do that, then know that God's there.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people, a lot of different kinds of leaders,
Feel like threatened by apostles. And, so if they don't know what one is or what their purpose is, a lot of times people are just trying to control the apostles. They feel threatened. They can see, that this person has, like a tendency to be looked up to.
Yeah.
A tendency to, inspire others. And when you've got somebody that groups will follow, people pay attention to that. They want to make sure that they're following, that apostle into something that they can control.
Yeah.
Or something that they at least agree with.
Yeah.
And apostles just can't be held down like that.
Yeah. And that's a big part of this. So, I mean, I say the thing about the churches and whatnot, and about how, the focus is on what works. And everything that Heather's saying there is extremely important for understanding why you don't find a lot of apostles in the church, and also for why you don't find a lot of apostles doing what they do. See, when you find a church that's run by an apostle, or where apostles are prevalent, you find an interesting dynamic, and that's that people really migrate to those places. Because there's an innate thing. Apostles are anointed to lead. And even if that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the head of the church, they're still leaders in the church. and I say this, you know, thinking about the various apostles who have come and gone in our church. We have had a ton of them, more than most churches. I went to, you know, when I went to Solid Rock, Bridgetown, whatever you want to call it, you know, I was there for like 4 years. And the staff, like the people that I was interacting with on a daily basis, when I think back to it, like, none of them were apostles. Like, none of them. Teachers, evangelists, shepherds, mostly teachers, though. John Mark kind of like draws that kind of thing. There was one who may have been an apostle, although the water's a little murky on that one. But yeah, I mean, there's that. When I went to Rise City Church, evangelists, like, everybody's an evangelist. They train everybody to be an evangelist. Like, the only person on the leadership team who's not an evangelist is the worship leader. And he feels so out of place. Like, when you talk to him, when you interact with him, he's kind of his own person entirely. And I did sit-down conversations with several members of the leadership, and that was the big thing that I drew from it, was just like, wow, this guy, all of them feel the same, this guy feels different, and he feels that too. And that's the point, is that, like, and none of them were apostles. Not one. And that's the thing, is what Heather's saying specifically about this, about that feeling threatened thing, is when you have somebody walk in and they feel, like, naturally charismatic, and just to be, like, completely open about it, you know, you think about, like, in our group, in our dynamic, you think about, say, like, the apostles in the group on the regular are myself and Grant. Sean. So when you look at it and kind of like see the way that that people migrate to those people, look to those people for information, for knowledge, for perspective, for different things, it's innate. You know, no offense to, like, Dusty, but not a lot of people are looking to Dusty for that kind of guidance. But when she shares words as a prophet, you know, those will cut through. And that's the thing, is that, like, we all have our different roles. We all have our different strengths. And as a result, we really develop those strengths, and we are able to kind of mesh together in order to create something, a place that's comfortable and safe, but also a place where people can grow. So when you think about, like, you know, I'm, as an apostle, when Grant comes in and, like, people migrate to him, I don't care. Like, it doesn't bother me. I don't feel...
I think you do. You might, maybe.
I don't feel threatened by Grant, or by Sean, or by different people. When Bradley came through, or when Ellis came through, you know, I didn't feel threatened by them or anything like that. It was just like, oh, hey, I get you. And the thing of it is that, like...
You know it's not their fault.
What?
In a way.
Yeah, no, I know.
Like, that came to my mind.
Yeah. I know how apostles work. Mm-hmm. I'm one. We get a lot of attention. They're all kind of like, for whatever reason, they're all the guy.
Yeah.
So when you get like 2 or 3 of them in a room together, they're all the guy at the same time. And it can be a little daunting to try to, like, herd that collection of cats, but at the same time, it's fine. Mm-hmm. Whereas, speaking from experience, where I've gone into other churches or been a part of other small groups, you know, there was even one where it was run by an apostle, and he was always threatened by me. Because I was like I was the other one there. I actually wasn't even the only other one. There was another guy too. But what he did was he kind of like mitigated that guy down and made him believe that he was something else, in order to try to like send him on this wild goose chase of believing himself to be something that he wasn't. So he was focused on being that, and as a result was not a threat. It's dumb and it's gross, but it's what happened. But the point is that that kind of stands as an example of what happens a lot of times with apostles. You know, like prophets, apostles and prophets lend themselves best to persecution and exile from the church, because they come in with things that will change the way that the church works. And it may not be in the way that everybody wants it to work, but it will be the way that God has told them he wants it to work.
They're non-compromising.
Non-compromising is exactly true. So that's a thing that happens, and that's a thing that we find ourselves dealing with. So it's hard to found something in that to create that community, that opportunity for community, when, you know, somebody at the top is just objectively going to turn hostile. You know, when I talked about offices the first time, I talked about apostles and the way that oftentimes, like what I've seen actually, and not just for myself but others, is it's teachers that are the most prevalent ones to kind of find themselves in conflict with apostles. I mean, it's not just teachers. Evangelists and apostles tend to clash too. But in both cases, you know, it comes down to the kind of vision that's there. A lot of teachers, they have like a direction for where they think things should go, and that's based off of their knowledge. Whereas apostles come in with something, a direction that things need to go, based off of what they feel, and they know it. It's a conviction that runs deep inside their very souls, and they can't escape that. They can't turn it off. It's a part of them. And that's something that you'll find even with apostles that aren't close to God. They have that. There's something there, and they just feel it, they know it. It's intrinsic to their very nature. And they can't let it go. They can't drop it.
It would be like they were letting go of life.
Mm-hmm. It's why they found. They have to build that into a foundation. They have to turn that into something that can then be built upon. Because what they are is carrying a piece of something that God's given them. Vision, direction, a directive, just a something. You know, your conviction could easily just be that, you know, as an apostle, your conviction could be that you you feel that the church needs to do this thing right, needs to be built right, needs to be compassionate, needs to do good. Okay? And that's going to be the foundation of your church. Now, ideally, everybody that comes in, the other offices, they're going to build on that. And they're going to bring it all together into that functioning community. Whether you ask them to or not, it's not going to matter. And apostles do have a certain gift for that. In general, for finding like where other people fit. They're not always good at expressing that. They're certainly not always good at helping people. How do I put this? They're not always good at like accepting that from other people. They're much more prone to trying to carry the whole thing on their own backs. And I say that for myself, as well as every other apostle that I've known. And if Grant is watching this, I know you feel me. You know, just like if Bradley was watching this, I suspect he would too. Or Ellis. Yeah, even Brendan, the apostle who doesn't know he's an apostle.
He does now.
Yeah, if you are by chance watching this, when we started the Office series and you said you have all the offices, yeah, you were wrong. I thought the same thing. For myself, I was wrong. It happens. It's what happens when you get that nasty little concoction of like pride and arrogance that both of us have. And then you tell them that you can be special. Yeah. Yeah. Yay us. And yeah, the can's full of Mountain Dew. Nothing else. Anyway.
I'm going to change that.
No, you're not.
I think I need to go to the bathroom now. Can I hold your drink?
Rude.
What?
Anyway.
Let me start my own thing.
So there's a lot to say on the matter, and like it's kind of been a thing. Because the truth is that there are a lot of ways that you can go talking about this particular subject. But to get to the point of founding and what it's for and how it works, and we've touched on that a lot. But looking at the objective want with this, the thing that we desire, the thing that we crave, especially in this current climate, is that foundational gifting that apostles bring to the table. See, this is one of those times when, if we're apostles, like if your office is that of apostle, you need to be stepping up and doing what you do. And I know that that's easier said than done, which is why there are a few videos on it that we've put up. Like, just go back and watch the original Office series. And skip the other 4 and watch the one about apostles, and then watch some of the stuff about interaction and things like that. Just to help flesh it out. Because I could talk about apostles for a long time. And the reality is that, it's going to take hours. There's a lot to say because, again, this is something that's poorly understood. But it is important. There's a whole, subgroup's identity wrapped up in how they function and do this stuff. But to bring it all to a close with this particular message about founding and about the way that apostles are intended to work in that way of creating that little slice of heaven on earth. And it obviously doesn't look like that, okay? When we think of heaven on earth, we think of something like ethereal. In reality, it looks like chaos. And people are fighting with each other and running back and forth and doing all these dumb things. And half the time the apostles themselves are too, because it's a mess. And that's what church is. And it takes somebody of significant anointing and gifting to manage that mess, to bring an order to that chaos, and that's where the apostles thrive.
They usually start with the vision.
Right. That vision that they have, that's where they can be secure, and they will carry that through. And we need that. I mean, right now, the world is in a state of utter chaos. And we need vision. And we need places where God has stepped up and said, hey, I've got this thing that I want you to do. And then our response should be to go do it. And as apostles, obviously we should be going and doing that. It eats at us on the inside when we don't have that, when we don't do it. And even for those who are not necessarily Christian, but have that office, have that part, that person, there's still a place to found something, to do something. Gather the people that you can and craft a community. Because we all need it right now. We're in a state of chaos. We're in a state where people are fighting each other all the time. Don't add to the conflict. Help craft something out of it. Order the chaos and give people the opportunity to thrive. You'll find peace there as much as they will. Yeah. And for those of us who are Christian, obviously we should be doing that. I mean, God would want that. I'm telling you from experience, from knowledge, and also just from what I'm hearing in my head, He wants that. Yeah. This is a time of trial, and people need to be, and God has plans. God has a desire to be close to His people, to be meeting His people, to be represented to His people. And where better for Him to meet His people than in that, biome, that community, that foundation, that house, whatever analogy you want to go with, but it's in the midst of His people. I always remember, I think it's Luke 17, where Jesus says, "The kingdom of God will not come by your careful observation. Neither will you say, 'Here it is,' nor 'There it is.' But instead, you will find that the kingdom of God is within you, or in your midst, depending on your translation." And that's the thing about God, is that He's not far off. He's right here, just waiting for us to notice that He's right here. And we're so caught up in so many different things. I've got people who spend all this time looking for Him and looking for Him and looking for Him and fighting with the idea that He's not there for them, and all they need to do is open their eyes and notice that He's standing right there. In Acts, or was it? No, it wasn't Acts. My bad. I think it was. I think it was John, where John writes about how the apostles, or the disciples, as they were at the time, after the death and resurrection of Jesus, they were out walking around, and they didn't even see Him. They saw a gardener, and it took Him actually calling their attention to the fact that He was there for them to notice that Jesus was there. And that wasn't even the first time that happened. There were also the two guys walking down, I believe it was the road to Emmaus.
Yep. That's one of my favorites.
The two guys walking down the road of Emmaus, Jesus shows up and starts talking to them, and they're just like, "Oh yeah, we heard about this Jesus guy." And He's like, "Oh really, have you? Interesting, tell me about him." Like, we do this all the time.
Their hearts burned within them. They could feel that He was there.
Yeah.
But they still couldn't see.
Yeah. And, as a result of the fact that we do this all the time, and it's not just like in the church, it's outside the church, there's so many people looking for God. It's so easy. If only we would open our eyes. If only we would pay attention to what He's actually doing. But we're so caught up in what we think He should be doing that we just don't get it. God, you should be doing what I'm telling you to do. God, you should be doing this thing that I think you should do. He's just standing there, wondering why you have not paid attention to the fact that He's standing there. A while back, I told there was a message where there was a vision of a group of kids walking with Jesus, and it was just like, which kid are you? Most of us are those kids that are running ahead and getting lost, putting ourselves in danger. And that's where a lot of us sit. We're not learning anything. We're experiencing things, sure, but we're not actually learning anything, no matter how much we try to convince ourselves we are. And that's what's important for us in these places where we're going to found a place. A foundation sits. It stays. It holds.
Yeah.
And everything can be built up from that. And that's why apostles are so fundamentally important to the church. The church that Jesus left behind. The church that he gave to his disciples and said, build it. Every one of the disciples was an apostle. They laid foundations. That's what they did. And as a result, that's what we do. And this isn't something that you can just take up. I'm sorry. Just because you're not a sent one just because the Bible says this, gives a definition, and your pastor somewhere said, well, we're all sent ones. It's not true. And even if you might not like it, I'm right. You can fight about it, rationalize. Right, we're not all Michael Jordan. Just like in the case of apostles, we're not, we're not all gifted in mercy. We're not all innately gifted in zeal. Apostles have a commitment and a conviction, but they don't necessarily have zeal. It's not always hopeful, it's not always gleeful, it's not always able to bring hope and move people forward. Sometimes they are just as bad about that as anybody else, but the evangelists will drag their asses towards that mission that God has for them. It's why it's a group thing. It's why it's a fivefold ministry instead of a one. We worship the individual way too much, and we don't appreciate the community. Well, apostles are different. And that's why they're important right now, to help craft those communities. And as a result, in crafting those communities, we create the opportunity for people to be met by God. To finally be able, because when you got a prophet in your community and they're able to say, God's right behind you, bro, then somebody might finally pay attention to the fact that God's right there. And you turn and you meet him.
They can help tell you where to look.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And what you're looking for.
Yeah. They can relay those messages that you need to hear in order to realize what's going on, why you're off, why you're not finding God.
What's actually in front of you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing to be a part of a community like that. It's a beautiful thing to be attached to that. And it's a far more beautiful thing to meet God and to know him. And that's why this is important. Every one of these videos, every one of these parts of this series, why are the offices important? Because one, it takes the responsibility of covering all of this off of each individual's shoulders, and instead gives us the opportunity to be able to stand back and focus on our strengths while letting others cover our weaknesses. And being able to know that we can rely on that, and that's important. That's so incredibly important, because we all have weaknesses. No matter how much we want to pretend, or no matter how much we move on the idea that we just have to act without them, or we have to act in spite of them, we can finally learn to look at the people around us and say, okay, well, this person has this strength where I'm weak. Hey, you want to go team up on this thing? Yeah? Cool. And you can work as a unit instead of individuals trying to cover everything. Because that's just exhausting. It's self-defeating. It's self-destructive. And what's more is when you find yourself crumbling under your own weaknesses, you've got an entire world of people who don't believe in God, who are more than happy to jump on you and prove to themselves and the people who are looking at you why your God isn't real, or why you're not good enough. It is still a war. And we sit in a state right now where it's more of a war than it has been in a long time.
It's more of a civil war.
So yeah, you got people looking to see you fall. They always have. One of the first lessons that I was taught in church was that you always have to be on your guard, because people are looking for reasons to not believe in you. So, had to be on at my best all the time. I've waned from that. I swear more than I did back then.
But you're still just as cute.
I had bigger muscles back then. I personally look back at pictures of myself from then and think, damn, I was sexy. Not so much right now. I'm moderately.
Excuse me.
I'm a little bit above average in the sexiness department right now, but not...
Way out of everybody's league of mine.
I don't drool over myself right now. I used to.
You used to.
Anyway, off that subject,
Okay.
so, this is the thing, that's what I was told, though, was that, you always have to be on your guard. You always have to look your best. And in some ways that's served me in a lot of ways in the past, and even still to this day. It's not necessarily a healthy way to look at things, but it's also a real way to look at things. And it sucks, but it is what it is. That said, when we come as a group, when we come together, think of it like the difference between a solitary soldier and a hoplite formation, a phalanx. You've got 5 people, shields interlocked, spears out at the ready, and they're marching together in order. The Greeks were some of the most feared warriors in all the world. The Persian army numbered something like 1 million, 100,000, something like that, and just small contingents of Greek soldiers were able to overcome them. Alexander the Great then took those same soldiers and carried them from Greece to India and took it all. It's a lot farther than those nomadic barbarians who came down to attack the Greeks and got murdered on their spears. Because because the reality is that we always have strength in numbers, and God's got us in groups of 5 at least, because He knows that. So there are places for us to come together here as groups of people who want to bring something to the world, to the church, as well as being people who just want to provide other people a home, a place where they can feel comfortable and safe. And we do want that. But the truth is right now, in our current climate, a little bit of safety goes a long ways. A little bit of comfort goes a long ways. A little bit of direction. A little bit of hope. That's why these videos are what they are. That's why we've done this series. To bring people together, to show each of us why what we have matters and how to bring it to the table and why it's important to bring it to the table and put it out there. And that's what I got.